Welcome everyone to the Dr. Abs Healthcast. I'm your host, Dr. Brian Abasolo, aka Dr. Abs, and on today's show we have functional gut health expert, Dr. Vincent Pedre, who is the medical director of Pedre Integrative Health and founder of Dr. Pedre Wellness. He's the medical advisor to two health tech startups, Embody 360 and FullScript. He's also the chief medical officer for United Naturals and a functional medicine certified practitioner in private practice in New York City since 2004. He is also certified in yoga and medical acupuncture. In 2017, he joined Orthomolecular as the chief clinical expert in the Pillars of GI Health program. And in 2018, he joined the faculty for the Institute for Functional Medicine, teaching the first ever introductory functional medicine courses to practitioners in Lima, Peru, Brisbane, Australia, and Mexico City. He believes the gut is the gateway to a better brain and excellent health. As the best-selling author of Happy Gut, the cleansing program to help you lose weight, gain energy, and eliminate pain, he has helped thousands of people resolve their digestive and gut-related health issues. I can't wait to talk to Dr. Pedre, so let's get the interview started. Welcome to the show, Dr. Pedre. How are you doing today?
Hey, Dr. Abs. No, great. Thanks for having me here. Always a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. All right, so we're gonna dive right in, Doc. I know we're gonna talk about your book, Happy Gut, the cleansing program to help you lose weight, gain energy, and eliminate pain. Look, shameless plug, he has the book right there. All right, so let's dive right in. Can you discuss basically how the health of the soil, your diet, and the gut are interconnected?
Oh, so important. That's a really big one. Years ago I met Maria Rodale, who's the granddaughter of Rodale, who basically is considered the father of the organic movement in the U.S. And her family still has a really big organic farm out, I think, somewhere in Pennsylvania. And she said something that stuck with me, that the soil is like the guts of the earth. And I don't think people realize that 25% of the biodiversity on the planet exists in our soil. And our soil is threatened right now by so many things: monoculture, the overuse of pesticides, that's changing the soil microbiome, which is then affecting the health of our plants. But it's all interconnected because we are a reflection of our outside environment. And our guts are sort of, we talk a lot about the gut as the internal garden, as an internal, sometimes I call it like our rainforest. But with 100 trillion bacteria that live in the large intestine, just to put that into perspective, there are 400 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy, and we have more bacteria in our gut than there are stars in our galaxy. And the combined genetic material of the bacteria outnumber our own genetic material like 10 to 1. So it is, or even, I think even as high as actually it's magnitude of 10 to the second, so 100 to 1. So we are all connected in that sense. And part of what builds the diversity of our gut microbiome, as I've learned from my travel and trips, and most recently being out in Africa and being able to spend time with the Hadza, which are the last of the few hunter-gatherers that still live their traditional life that they've been living for thousands of years, hunting for food, foraging in the forest for tubers, which are like root vegetables, kind of like jicama, and honey, wild honey. And they have one of the most diverse microbiomes on the planet. Wow. And part of the reason for that, I think, is not just what they eat. They don't eat in comparison to a Western diet that has so many different things. It's pretty much narrower. There's berries, there's honey, there's tubers, and then there's the animals that they hunt. So it's not such a huge variety in that sense. But what they do get is they get exposure to the natural world. and they're not washing their hands with antibacterial soaps, and they're not using hand sanitizer. They're getting dirt on themselves. And all of that carries a microbiome, and that helps diversify the microbiome. We know that kids that are raised on farms have a much more diverse microbiome than kids raised in the city. And it's just a matter of exposure, especially if there's livestock. And diversity, I'm talking about diversity, and I started talking about the soil diversity, and really diversity is the key to life. It's so important. And when it comes to the gut, diversity is what creates health. You want a diverse microbiome. You do not want a monoculture microbiome. That would not create health. You need both good and bad bugs. We talk a lot about having good bugs in the gut and getting rid of the bad bugs, but about 10% of the gut is bad guys. And they do serve some sort of purpose when in balance with the good gut bugs. The problem is when things go out of balance. And so those are the connections between the earth, the dirt, our gut microbiome, and kind of an important message for people as we become more and more, we've migrated to cities, we've become disconnected from nature. And really to realize that part of creating total wellness or health is to get out in nature. It is to kind of get dirty, get your hands in the mud, in the soil. That's part of what creates health. That's how we were designed. That's how our bodies were designed to live in this microbial milieu. We're not antimicrobial. Like, our bodies are bathed in microbes. So this idea of protecting ourselves from microbes is
the germaphobes.
It's absolutely ridiculous. They actually found that kids that wash dishes with their hands, which, if you think about the kitchen sponge, talk about like a petri dish of microbes. They have less propensity to allergies and asthma than if they don't. It's kind of interesting, how right now we're living in a world that still fears the germ, and it's like Louis Pasteur said, it's not the germ, it's the terrain. It's us. It's our terrain. It's the soil for the earth. It's the soil. That's what creates robust plants that offer the diversity of micronutrients and antioxidants that we need. And we need to see that, because the more we destroy the earth, we're also destroying ourselves.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, Doc, there's like seemingly gut unrelated diseases such as allergies, asthma, immune system dysregulation, aka autoimmune disease. Now, how does the gut play a part and is actually the key to addressing those conditions?
So important. I think what people don't realize is the gut is the foundation. The same way that I talked about how the soil is the roots of the earth. Well, the gut, your digestive system, are the roots of the body. And if you think of that analogy, then the root system of a plant is very similar to the gut, the root system. And if a plant gets sick, you'll see it in the leaves, right? Like, the leaves might turn brownish, yellow. You can see that they're not healthy. And the idea, the way Western medicine approaches a lot of things is paint the leaves green, and now they're healthy because now they look green.
Yeah, right.
So everything's fine. But anybody who's a farmer, who's a horticulturalist, they know that the way you heal the leaves is to go to the root system. If the problem is in the leaves, you look at the roots. Yeah. And the same thing with the body. If the problem is in the external, that you have to look at what's happening internally, what's happening with the health of the gut microbiome, what's happening with the health of the gut lining. I mean, probably 2 out of 3 Americans have leaky gut right now. And there's so many reasons for that. And then that affects all sorts of things, including your airway, which is intimately connected to the gut. Interestingly, the airway is formed by the same cellular tissue as the gut is formed in the embryo. The same cells that fold in to create the gut, it's also those cells that then create the airway. And it's fascinating that in Chinese medicine for thousands of years, they knew this. And if you study Chinese medicine, the qi flow and the meridians, they connected the lung meridian to the stomach and the spleen meridian. Wow. So they already knew that there was a connection here between the airway and the lungs, and I've seen it with and the gut, and I've seen it with my patients. Yeah, you correct the diet, you fix the gut, and you can get rid of allergies. You know, sometimes maybe it depends on the person and depends on the degree of disease. Sometimes you reduce medication, but a lot of times you can get people off of medication. And there's so many examples of that, of diseases that seemingly don't have any relation to the gut, and yet they are connected to food, they are connected to what you're eating, to the inflammation in your gut, like migraines. Asthma is an inflammatory condition, but so are other things like autoimmune disease, autoimmune thyroid, even hives, you know, skin condition. If you go to a dermatologist, they're going to give you skin cream for hives, or they might give you a systemic steroid. Again, these are what I call band-aid remedies, because you're not really looking at what truly is happening in the root system that's causing this. And it's usually some sort of inflammatory condition. And the gut is our biggest inside-outside world. It is our biggest surface of interaction with the outside world, outside of our skin.
Yeah, no, 100%. Now, what would you say as far as what does cutting edge science reveal about what we call the gut-brain axis, and how does it relate to quote unquote gut feelings? You know, the gut is our intuitive center.
Yeah, so there's a nerve that connects the brain to the gut. It's called the vagus nerve. And the really interesting thing about this nerve, which is part of the sympathetic parasympathetic nervous system, the vagus is more part of the parasympathetic nervous system, controls movement through the gut. So it controls the smooth muscle of the lower esophagus all through the entire, almost the entire gut until it gets to the rectum. And so vagal tone is controlling that peristalsis, those rhythmic contractions through the gut. But what's interesting is that we found that there are more north-pointing neurons in the vagus nerve than south-pointing. So in other words, that 70% of the neurons in the vagus nerve are actually pointing from the gut back to the brain, and only 30% are pointing down.
Interesting.
And yet vagal tone is really important, because one thing we find, you probably as a chiropractor will find this really interesting, that in a patient who's suffered an acute brain injury, so concussion, where they're knocked out, their brain gets inflamed. One of the first things that gets set off is vagal nerve tone. And as a result of that, within 30 minutes of losing vagal tone, the gut becomes hyperpermeable. So you get leaky gut. So now you have a patient who's in the hospital, their brain is probably swollen from a traumatic injury, they're unconscious, and now their gut is becoming leaky, which is going to add fuel to the fire, because now that barrier that's protecting you from all the toxins, the things that should stay inside the gut, is now going to become open and allow these things to get into circulation, and that will affect the health of the brain. So it's really interesting how it's a bidirectional interface, not to mention that more neurotransmitters are produced in the gut than there are in the brain. Serotonin, melatonin, 400 times more melatonin is produced in your gut than in your brain by the pineal gland, which is really fascinating, because we think of melatonin as a sleep hormone, but melatonin is actually a master regulator in the gut. It stimulates contractions. It also helps reduce pain, and it serves as an antioxidant and anti-inflammatory. So there's a lot that's going on in that gut brain that we didn't give enough credit to.
Yeah. So do you feel it's okay to take like a melatonin supplement, like if you're suffering from a little bit of insomnia?
Yeah, I mean, I always try to kind of go through root cause. So if someone's suffering from insomnia, look at things that could be interrupting the photoreceptor connection with the brain. So blue light exposure, smartphones, laptops, ambient light, even just exposure to EMFs, Wi-Fi signals, all those things can disrupt your melatonin secretion. If the gut is out of order, then that's going to affect the brain health. So very important in people who have gut imbalances to work on fixing gut health. And then, of course, yeah, I mean, melatonin serves as a powerful anti-inflammatory. So we think of it as a sleep hormone, but it does so many other things. I think if someone's not getting that deep sleep, I'm big on data. So I love when patients wear those biometrics and record their sleep patterns to see, how much deep sleep you're getting. Are you getting more than an hour? Are you getting to 90 minutes of deep sleep? If not, are there ways that we can improve it? One way is slow release melatonin, so sustained release, so that it keeps um, releasing throughout the night in these people who are not producing enough melatonin. But you've got to figure out where is it coming from, and even if is there an old brain injury that is now kind of rearing its ugly head, and maybe they need some neurofeedback along with gut rebalancing.
Yeah, 100%. So you talk a lot about the mind, body, spirit medicine. How is working at 3 levels required to achieve healing at a deep restorative level? And how does the role of meditation and mindfulness play into the health and wellness aspect?
Yeah, I think that, especially now in 2020, it's such a great uh, thing to come to realize that the elephant in the room, which is stress, plays such a big role in our ability to recover from anything. So, I was talking about the vagus nerve, the balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. If you're in that fight or flight state, you cannot heal in that state. So if I think of like the hierarchy of healing for the body, and anybody who's been through a healing journey, they can understand this. Yeah. The foundation is the physical body, right? We've got to heal the physical body. You've got to kind of meet the essential needs. If that isn't met, then you can't deal with some of the other stuff. But even at the same time, if you're dealing with emotional blocks, anger, frustration, relationship issues, all of those things. I mean, just think how many people gain weight when they're in a bad relationship. Yeah. So you cannot ignore in any healing journey the mind body connection, mind, emotions, working on clearing those emotions, which could be through therapy, it could be through plant medicine, so many different avenues. And I think ultimately, I say, mind, body, spirit. Spirit could be purpose, like higher purpose, like finding your reason for being here, like the deeper meaning of life, something that's greater than you, living in gratitude. I think, when it comes down to mindset, it's just amazing, like how different and how much more resilient I see my patients who have that positive mindset, and the ones who come in and they're already defeated and they think that they're never going to get better. They just live in that limbo state for a long time. And you wonder, is it coming from the mind, or is it coming from a sense of spiritual disconnect, where they just don't feel a connection with something greater than themselves? Yeah. The magnitude of life and purpose. And sometimes, look, there's the hero's journey, and you are perhaps meant to suffer to find your purpose. And I think that that's sometimes an important part of the path for people. But as long as you don't get stuck in the suffering, you use the suffering like alchemy to transmute you and to, remold you into something resilient that has learned from those obstacles, to be able to grow and heal. And I honestly think, you can't bypass, like you could say, I heal my body and I feel great, but if you're stuck and you're full of bad emotions and negative thoughts, then you're not living your best life.
100%. Yeah.
And if you're not connected to something greater, even if it's just going out in nature and admiring, like, for me, it's like standing at the seashore and just admiring the power of the ocean and the sound of the waves. Just connecting to something greater, just looking up in the sky and seeing, like, wow, we're really small
Yeah.
in the scheme of things.
Yeah, I just feel like we don't take the time to take all that type of stuff in. Like we're just in the hustle and bustle with the stress and the jobs and all that stuff. So I can totally relate to that. Going back to gut health, a lot of people, message me and ask me, what's the best diet? A lot of it's for, weight loss, but, as far as gut health, what is the best diet? And can you maybe compare and contrast some of the different diets out there? There's paleo, the whole food diet, Whole30, keto, et cetera, et cetera. Intermittent fasting is obviously a big thing that people love doing nowadays. Can you just discuss maybe and compare and contrast those?
Yeah, and you can also mix and match, which I think is also kind of important, like for people to realize. It depends on how concrete you are, but I think sometimes people get so dogmatic about things and they feel like if they go outside of what the strict description of the diet, that they're not really following it. And yet, ultimately, we're meant to be intuitive about how we eat, and you have to figure out what works best for you within all these different pictures. Intermittent fasting is really great for gut health. So we always talk about what to eat, but we also have to talk about not eating. And what not eating does to the gut, it gives the gut the ability to rest. It gives it the ability to heal, do kind of its upkeep, and it reduces inflammation that can occur, especially if you have leaky gut. There's something called postprandial after meal toxemia, endotoxemia, where all these bacterial endotoxins influx into the body. And we see that as a risk factor for obesity, for diabetes. So a special diet for gut health is very similar to paleo. The one thing that I learned and think is quite curious, and I've seen it over and over, is my happy gut diet is very close to paleo diet. The difference, or one of the key differences, is that I take eggs out, and then we reintroduce afterwards. What I found is, by limiting grains, I do allow, so mine is kind of like a mix of things, because it's not strict paleo in the sense that you have to avoid all grains. So I do allow rice, some grains for fiber, which I think is important, but wheat, gluten, which is very inflammatory, increases gut permeability, that goes out, as well as dairy, soy, corn, sugar, alcohol, coffee, all those things that really kind of like bog down your system. Yeah. That's really important. But what's really surprised me is how many people I've had who've done the program, who've done other programs that were paleo, where they still had eggs, or they might have had, there's some programs that allow unlimited fruit. And I've seen people get sick doing those things, eating too much fruit, causing yeast overgrowth. And the other surprising thing is people who, when they reintroduce eggs, find that they didn't realize that eggs were causing symptoms in their body, whether it's nausea, whether it was headaches, whether it was just not feeling so great. And they didn't know this before taking the eggs out, because when you're eating the same food all the time, you kind of get numb to the symptoms that are in your body. You become less aware. That's why we do these kind of like the cleanse, elimination diet, cleaning out the system, almost like getting to a blank slate. And then you reintroduce one thing at a time so that you can understand. So basically then you're figuring out, well, what is my individuality? Can I have eggs? Can I have some dairy? And part of what I do is teach people to be more intuitive about their eating, and to be able to be almost like their own healer than say, oh, I have to do just paleo this way, or I'm going to do keto and I'm only going to do keto, but then they run into a problem where they plateau and they can't continue to lose weight. And they wonder, well, what should they do? Well, the body's meant to kind of shift over time. The same way, like when you work out, like you're not going to do the same routine over and over. What happens to your muscles?
Yeah,
they're going to get used to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So that's part of what I think is important. And I try to teach people is to become intuitive about how food affects them. And a lot of people, you'd be surprised, they're so unaware of when they eat something, what happens to their body. And it isn't until you kind of really shine a light on it and bring focus to it, sometimes make people journal so that they're keeping food they eat, how they feel, because it's so crazy how people just don't have memories for things because they're so blindly eating as they rush through their day and they're busy with work. So their focus is over here, but not on their bodies.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So to finish off, I mean, you talked a little bit about your program as far as like, but what can the listeners out there, if they wanted to achieve, true gut cleansing, what is it that they, what are some steps that they have to do starting today to accomplish that? And why is it so important to regularly cleanse and, basically balance out that microbiome?
It's kind of like thinking like what happens to your garage if you don't clean it out once in a while, it just starts getting accumulated with all sorts of junk in there. And same thing with the body, like it's like the same way you would clean your car. Like once in a while, you've got to give your body a total clean out. And there's different ways, like you can start as simply as cutting out wheat. You don't have to go all gun ho and say, I'm going to do full on this. You could start with cutting out wheat and dairy. I made it easy for people, so I realized that even after I wrote my book, like this is dense. It's a lot of information. It's a lot of things for people to do. So I came out with a 20-day program that is a whole kit that people can get, and it has the entire protocol for them. And they can download an app that guides them through the program that's available on happygutlife.com. And even that for some people was too complicated. So we took it and we dialed it down into a 7-day detox. So we call it our Happy Gut Reset. And it's basically, if you just want to kind of get your feet wet and you need sort of like a reset on what you've been doing, you feel like you've drifted too far, maybe you've been drinking too much, maybe eating too many carbs, gaining some weight in the middle, and you just want a little correction, then that's the 7-day. If you want a complete reboot, then you commit and you dive in and you do a full 28 days. But I'm try to make it so that there's different levels for people that they can choose from, make it easier for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are your thoughts on, I mean, you go to any food, specialty food or supplement store, and there's all these, detox teas and, detox capsules. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Or do you feel it should be strictly with food and intermittent fasting?
Oh, it's a good question. Yeah. I mean, I talk about this a lot, about the phases of liver detoxification. And, there's a lot of different cleanses out there that are like liquid cleanses, water cleanses, juice cleanses. And the problem is that it completely ignores the 3 pillars of detoxification. And the first very important pillar is your liver. And your liver has 2 phases to its detox: phase 1, phase 2. Most people get phase 1 right, but a lot of detoxes, a lot of these cleanses, they don't get phase 2 right. Phase 2, you need amino acids, you need proteins to run phase 2. And the thing is that phase 1 is an Olympic runner. It's a sprinter, actually. It can go super fast. So kind of like that episode of I Love Lucy with the chocolates on the factory treadmill.
Yeah.
And phase 2 is I Love Lucy. It's like a sloth. It moves slow, and if you start throwing too much at phase 2, then it's going to back up. And the problem is that between phase 1 and phase 2, there's this reactive intermediate that's actually more toxic than the substance that's being detoxified. And so the way you support phase 2 and make it into a runner is through amino acids. And that's where a lot of these cleanses go wrong. And that's what I included in my 7-day detox with 2 supplements, Detox 1 and Detox 2. But Detox 2 has all the amino acids that we know that need to support that phase 2 of liver detoxification, which most people get wrong. And then you're wondering, like, you're cleansing and you feel tired, you may feel mentally foggy, you're getting headaches, and you're wondering why. And you think, oh, it's just because I'm detoxing. Could be because you're not supporting that phase 2. And then the other 2 pillars, so pillar 1, liver, pillar 2, the gut, and pillar 3 is the gut microbiome. And that completes like how you're going to do a total detox program, you know, if you're doing it right.
And with these, can you speak a little bit more on the amino acids, just so people know out there, like what is specific amino acids are involved?
Examples are like L-glutamine, glycine, taurine. Those are really important. NAC, N-acetylcysteine, which is the precursor for glutathione. Maybe people have heard of that word, glutathione, one of the body's master detoxifier. Yep. Super important, but it's not the only one. There's 6 detoxification pathways in phase 2, and they're supported by all these different amino acids. So it's important that when someone's detoxing, you know, you think about, like, you're going to do a liquid cleanse. Well, at some point, if you're not getting enough amino acids, you're going to actually stall your detox process. And you're going to start to build internal toxins. They're going to recirculate. So it's very key to make sure that that's incorporated, any detox program, that it has support for that, especially if it's going to be more than 3 days long. If you're going to do a 3-day juice cleanse, just kind of clear the body, fine. But longer than that, you really need to get into supporting that phase 2 liver detox.
Absolutely. And touching on intermittent fasting again, do you recommend, you know, specific, you know, ratio with the eating window and, you know, fasting window? Do you recommend anything in particular on that?
Yeah, I mean, and it depends on male or female. It's not perfectly the same for both. Basic would be a 12-hour overnight fast starting at the end of dinner, going to breakfast the next day. But if you're looking to get to autophagy, where your body is basically recycling old proteins, like breaking down the scaffolding and rebuilding, then the belief is you need to get to that 16-hour mark. And another thing that people do that, so you can think of it as fasting, or you can think of it as a eating window. So you do an eating window of 8 hours during the day. And during those 8 hours is when you eat all your calories for the day. It depends on what your goals are. Some people will also reduce calories during the eating window some days, but the whole term intermittent means not daily. Yeah. Which a lot of people, what they end up doing is they're doing a 16-hour fast every night, and they finish eating dinner. The next meal isn't until lunch the next day. But like I said earlier, like when you're doing the same thing over and over, your body gets used to it. So you really want to kind of shake it up. Yeah. So maybe some days you do a little bit of a longer fast, some days you do a shorter fast. And the thing that I see that trips up women all the time is that a lot of time when they're doing this, they end up lowering their protein intake. And if you decrease your protein intake, you're actually going to decrease the amount of calories your body is burning per day. You're going to slow your metabolism, and you're going to stall your weight loss. So it's always really important to make sure you're getting the right proportions of your macronutrients, especially when you're fasting. And if you've taken out one meal per day, it's very likely you won't get enough protein by the end of the day.
Yeah. Wow. So interesting. All right, Doc. So tell me where people can find the book, because I mean, the gut, the health of the gut is just so important. And I feel a lot of people can benefit from reading your book. Where can people find it? You know, if you're on social, you know, drop your handles and let everybody know how we can,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, visit happygutlife.com, sign up for our emails. We send out promos and also weekly blog posts on different gut-related topics. My book is there. You can also find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Do they still exist? Like online?
They're going out of business soon. Yeah.
And you can find me on Facebook, Dr. Vincent Pedre, and Instagram at Dr. Pedre. So I'm pretty active on social media and posting there all the time.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Doc, thank you so much for dropping so much knowledge on today's show. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, it was like,
Like,
Yeah, absolutely. But thank you again, and hope to talk to you soon for sure.
all right. Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
All right, take care, Doc. Appreciate you coming on.